There were record-breaking stress levels around the business of film after COVID, when the SAG-AFTRA strike was at its peak and the theaters in my city were converted to gyms and offices. My feed was flooded with "film is dead" or "theaters empty" propaganda. People credited Barbenheimer with saving cinema in 2023, but if any of that is true, all I can say is that 2024 is the year that reverses that narrative. So without further ado, here are my top 9 films of 2024. If you're new here, hi, my name's Andrea. Movies are a big part of my life, and thank you for being here. There may be spoilers, but I tend to leave that at the end of each section, so feel free to skip those if you care. Starting with number 9, I'm gonna give it to Immaculate. I'm not one to love films with an overemphasis and reliance on Catholic imagery and hierarchical structures if used in a fictional setting, because they tend to feel overused. And I hate horror movies with pregnant women in them. Oh my goodness. If they try to leave the film on a note that appeases too many audiences, including the Catholic and Christian audience, it becomes boring and unnecessarily diplomatic. And in a horror setting, the overlap between the religious paraphernalia and paranormal visual cues err on the side of corny, honestly. Immaculate did neither of these things. Notable peaks in its stories were designed to harness a thrill factor, which leaned on striking visuals without an over-reliance on meaningless gore. It trusted the audience, tapping into the general awareness that audiences have or have been bombarded by about the abusive potential that charismatic leaders have, the power to exercise over organized religious groups. So it harnessed an unusual and subtle sci-fi twist to the source of fear of this film, which made it so captivating to watch. It wasn't just the miraculous virgin pregnancy and what society perceived its meaning to be, but it's the overlap with science that ironically contradicts its plot in a rather humorous way. The holy nail that still has Jesus' DNA. The convent's father being such a staunch believer in science, to wrongfully wield it to gain even more power. I thought, how is this going to end? Meaning, are they really going to wrap up the evil man's plot and disillusion the cult? How would they go about it? The spoiler is, they didn't do it. And it doesn't matter, but she gets out. And that does. Number 8, Bottoms. Technically released in 2023, but Bottoms followed 2 unpopular girls as they started a fight club to meet girls and lose their virginity. Rachel Sennot and Ayodeberry selling their fake lore from spending a summer at juvie, which totally happened, and then the tension that comes in when they may be exposed for never having gone to juvie. It was so easy A-coded. Between a makeshift mini-bomb, killer football scene, and a pineapple juice threat shadowing the entire end sequence, this movie was hilarious, surrealistic, satiric, and just like all the things. And remember all those high school movies of the nerdy guys who crafted insanely unrealistic plots to get with the girl and somehow gets with the girl anyway because that's the power of Hollywood? That's what they did here. Without the intent to subvert the high school rom-com narrative of the girl that wants to get the guy or make the terrible rendition of the nerd to popular to love interest, like Dear Revenge and Mean Girls 2, I am petitioning Bottoms to be a cult classic, if it's not already, sorry. The coloring reminds me of Death Becomes Her, and its absurdist world allowed the struggle of lesbian pursuit to shine without pity or over-sexualization. It was simple and high school and maximalist at the same time. I don't quite know how to explain this, but its execution meant everything to make the virgin nerd trope genderless, and its story made it so novel and unexpected for that reason. I don't know, this movie just needed to exist. Rachel Sennot and Ayodeberry, I love you so much. Number 7, Anora. Other than wishing it was worked on with or by a sex worker and not just consulted by. Indie film roots, a powerful performance by Mikey Madison, and unexpected movie all around. Sean Baker was a cheerleader director here, and his trust and specificity with the cast and vision for the film, embedded with realism, all while balancing the small budget, was a feat on its own. I love the emphasis they placed on the credit they wanted to give to Coney Island, real-life sex workers that taught Mikey Madison how to act and be, but I wished the middle section or second act or chase for the Russian man wasn't as forgettable as it was, honestly. The wealth of go with what feels natural improv felt so incredible, but I think that created some repetitive parts for me. This is less about wanting to call it overrated now that it's a highly accredited and applauded film, and more about my personal preference for the meat of a film. The last 20 to 30 minutes were absolutely my favorite, though. Chilling moments from the last film, Anora defaults into intimacy as a form of exchange, but she also hates it when it's reciprocated, and we see what's underneath for a second. And I think about how they were really getting somewhere by drawing a line between the current state of the sex work industry and how Anora was constantly fighting for all kinds of autonomy throughout the film. But then I also remember The Last Showgirl and think, maybe there was a little more to be said without exploitation. Number 6, Challengers. Like Anora, I've honestly been waiting for a simple, good old drama movie. When I say good old, I mean grounded in reality, to bring back the nostalgia of the 2000s for me. Challengers was a movie that challenges the obsession with success and love and perfection between a set of characters you don't need to identify with to see yourself in. It wasn't at all the mid-budget films of 2000 or the high-budget, low-quality films of 2022, and honestly, there hasn't been a love triangle we've cared about since Twilight. Experiencing this masterful story to Luca Guadagnino's lens felt so special. From the sharply set designs that complement the revolutionary sexy techno soundtrack that ties the tense long sequences of tennis and other, it was designed so meticulously. The form embodied the story. The story in all of its parts and characteristics and details were felt tenfold because of its design. So I need to just watch more of his films. And now that I'm finally filming this post-Oscars, we're all thinking it, but Challengers was robbed. For them to not even be nominated for original soundtrack and El Mal to win was embarrassing. El Mal. Number 5, The Substance. Surprise, surprise, a film that I hated at first watch, had nightmares for some days because of, and brought me the volition to create a video essay on, made it to my top 9. Coralie Farjah and the team behind The Substance created something that will stand the test of time on its own as cinema and art, as social commentary, and as a namesake cult favorite. Filled with inspiration and depth from previous greats of horror, the camera work, sprinkled with tasteful shock factors and grounded in sci-fi and horror, brought audiences all over the world to laugh and throw up together. Congratulations to me Moore for the Golden Globe, and thank you for the love on my video essay, which you can go watch for some more of my thoughts if you haven't yet. This one may come as a shock to some people, but number 4, I have Saturday Night. The whole thing was as historic as it needed to be and punches you in the gut with nerves and ambition. Obsessed with SNL for what it means, represents, and created for others, Saturday Night was a frantic homage that I felt was intended to acknowledge its contextual novelty, that at the time SNL was created, there had been nothing like it. And who knew sketch comedy would remain and prevail the way that it has on SNL today? Lorne Michaels' character truly felt like the underlying thread to the entire production, which worked on so many levels, and his POV of both focusing on what needs to be done amidst the chaos and ambition that hadn't been seen before in the room was something really special, especially as a 20-something-year-old. It felt like what it became in a way. They created this room and 50-year-long production that invited more people into the room to craft and create the greatest comedians in their paths. But before the success there wasn't a room. There was only a ceiling to break. Other critics have mentioned it felt like it lacked emotional depth because of the lack of runtime, screen time to sit with and learn about the characters we see on Saturday Night. But in an incredible use of metadrama, which is drawing attention to the way that this work is a work of theater, which is quite literally what Saturday Night is. No one has a spare second this night to get emotionally attached to anyone, not even the cast themselves. No one gets to learn about a comedian in depth before sitting in front of them and hearing their stand-up. And when it's sketch comedy, even less of themselves is portrayed and understood by the audience. What matters is going live, and that's why the end, when they finally go live, felt like a release of a cathartic whisper after the title of the end of the film, Saturday Night. And you hear the word live. You feel that. You hear it. There's something about the way Reitman's instruction given to the actors, like to not contact their real-life counterparts if they're still alive, that you could feel. It's an authentic level of pressure, amateurism, and frenetic energy that any young creative would feel in that setting. Do I wish they kind of stuck to a perfect 90-minute runtime? Kind of, but I think it's so fitting again in its metadrama. It went overtime, as over-budget productions tend to do. Number 3, Strange Darling. If you want to watch a film that puts a new twist on twists, this is the one. Strange Darling debuted at Fantastic Film Fest in 2023 and had a limited release in 2024 August to September. Committing to the bit of non-linear storytelling in its most intentional, humorous, and speckled with some Tarantino-esque dedication, Strange Darling is an indie movie I'll have by my heart for a very long time. This was an electrifying thriller that gripped me from start to finish. The nameless characters gave killer performances, the colors were... The cinematography was articulate and detailed. And the story, writer-director J.T. Milner was inspired by the total emotive effects of films by Hitchcock, Shyamalan, and believes in the intelligence of the audience, and you can tell. It zigs and zags and subverts and plays with the audience's trust, but without relying on excessive dialogue to keep you hooked. And to the point of Strange Darling and a few other movies that have existed over the past few years, there are some movies where you watch it once, and that first time is so significant. It just takes your breath away. There's so much shock into it because you're experiencing the story for the first time. Movies like Saltburn, Magazine Dreams, you watch it for that very first time and it's never the same ever again. And that's why it's so special. That feeling is something that I just want, more people to feel. The thing I can't help doing when I'm at the cinema is guess what happens next, how it'll end, or the build up to the twist. Strange Darling took me on a roller coaster because it was filled with choice twists that kept me guessing and then had me giving up. It represented so much in regard to trust, narrator versus narrative, unreliable narration, dramatic irony. This is a snippet of an article from screencraft.org. 2024 viewers raised on the internet in a post The Sixth Sense, post Lost World, have come to expect narrative curveballs and are adept now at sniffing them out in a way they weren't generations ago. Showing your hand early in your script gives audiences less time to figure out the surprise you have in store for them. It also makes it more satisfying. Even if viewers guess what the twist is, if that shock comes around the midpoint, then the twist is not the destination of your movie, it's a journey point. The rest of the film can be about what the twist means for the characters instead of solely what it means for us in the audience. After watching Strange Darling, Challengers, and The Substance all kind of have this little techno edge in their sound effects and soundtrack a little bit, I haven't really seen it be used in cinema the way it has been lately, and I'm kind of digging it. Number 2, September 5. Watching a film together with a live audience symbolizes the act of coming together sans differences. September 5 wanted to test the limits and sources of our understanding by drawing attention to the credibility of reporters through an honest depiction of reporters struggling to make decisions about reporting real time what an event like that meant. The Munich Olympics was the first ever broadcasted instance of terrorism. Emphasized sensitivity, real urgency, and new dangers of an event like this being shared globally for the first time. In making this entire film solely about the capturing of that moment was a sound reminder that that kind of documentation didn't used to exist. This kind of responsibility that journalists had access to didn't exist. And I'll get to why this is important in a second. The precedent was set that documenting this worldwide was even possible due to the scale of the event suggested how this was left up to chance, quite poignantly reminding me that journalism and access to information is a gift, and reporters who are on the ground risk their lives every day for it. Only now are we able to really be updated that journalists have been killed in war zones. That's important. And this contrasts with the new wave of journalism made possible by individuals on social media. It invisibly challenged the notions held by every demographic and audience, whether you get your news just from news outlets locally or globally, or whether it's TikTok first and ABC later. September 5 reminds you to critique your sources of information and thereby beliefs, reminding you that you don't fully know whether you can even trust the moderators and broadcasters who did the best they could with what they have, but do they have vulturous motives of claiming the story and reporting it for their own? The elephant in the room the entire time you're there, because of the year it was released, is the misalignment in importance media outlets have placed on terrorist events today, when they don't criticize or evaluate genocidal conflict enacted by Israel. Maybe they're unable to politically, and maybe people are reporting on countries that push out others but are being silenced depending on where you are. Regardless, I couldn't help but remember the journalists on the ground who are bravely reporting about Palestine every day, and how the level of attention and grassroots support they have today would not have been possible decades ago, or we wouldn't have been made aware of it. Maybe this film serves as an ironic warning to the world in a way. It was about a story that more people in America would feel okay watching because it aligned with their values. It was a warning because it reminded the audience that Germany's recovery that never felt like it quite arrived for them, the world watching closely and deciding when and how to forgive, and now their return to a right-leaning state, determined to wash away the grave mistakes they've made. It made me think about when the US began to economically support Israel in 1971, and the timing of the terrorist attack in 1972, but with zero to no journalistic documentation of what was happening on Palestine's side. Number 1, I'm Still Here. Every component of I'm Still Here was beautiful. I highly recommend you watch it. I thought I was over the feel-good, family-forward biographical story. I was so wrong. Not only was this film not that, it embodies the essence of storytelling in its most dire. What it takes so that it lives on. The story of Rubens Paiva's abduction during Brazil's era under dictatorship, from the lens of his family and largely the bedrock of his wife, was inherited and succeeded through his son, who recounted the experience in writing. This was a show of the tenacity that lives and breathes through human life. The root of the fight we fight against injustice, and the empathy we feel for the family on screen, whether or not we knew they existed in real life or not, is a continued testament to the devotion we have for justice and other people. You could feel the length of the life Fernanda Torres lived throughout the film, from protecting her children from the truth to her persistent strength in old age. I'll stop there after I say that this was the movie you were supposed to watch and not The Brutalist. I'm throwing this in because free will. My least favorite movies of the year. Alien Romulus. Not because it was bad, but because women were so down after that. So down. Emilia Perez. If you watch this movie, you would understand. I don't even have to say anything about it. I don't think the internet even needed to say anything about it other than, just go watch it for yourself because it was awful. Tone deaf. It was kind of a hate watch for a lot of people, I think. The Brutalist, and the cinematography was really cool. But I'm Still Here really was doing what The Brutalist was supposed to do, except The Brutalist was just a little bit flat. And, from the lens of a man, I don't know, didn't do it for me. And Argyle was also one of my least favorite movies of the year. Anyways, thanks for listening. I can't wait to see what 2025 brings. There's already some standout movies that I got to watch recently. And I know I'm posting this way too late, but whatever. Drop your must-watches below, and I'll see you in the next one.